Today we'll be doing the process of Japanese paper marbling, which is called Suminagashi. Here I have a few different examples. This one I just used a red and yellow ink and swirled the colors around. This is printed on regular computer paper. This was printed on construction paper, and you can see the colors are just not quite as vibrant, but the process does still work. So here on this one I used a yellow, red, magenta, and purple. But that magenta and red you just can't see quite as well because I printed on the pink paper. Okay, so when you first get started, you want to make sure you have all of your materials ready. I have my tray, container of water, India inks, my computer paper, a couple of toothpicks. One will work just fine. And a pencil to write your name on the back of your paper. So I have already written my name on a few pieces of paper here. I recommend doing that before you get started, so that way you don't have to stop in the middle of printing or forget altogether and possibly mix up your prints with someone else. Oh, then I also take another piece of computer paper and I'm going to tear it, or at least just tear 2 strips. So I'm holding my finger at the top when I begin the tear to make it easier, and I support the rest of this paper. Okay, then you can take the 2 strips of paper and tear them down into smaller pieces. So they're somewhat of a square shape. They can be rectangle too, that's okay. This is a little bit big. It will still work, but I'm going to go ahead and just tear it down in half. Okay, and you can keep tearing that down as well. But set these off to the side. Place your tray not too close to the edge, but close enough to you. I would say a good 6 inches, 7 inches away from you and the edge of the table. Then you can take your pitcher of water, slowly start pouring it in. Now, the amount of water that you need will be at least a fingernail's worth. But what I like to do is test both ends of the tray, because you could be on an uneven surface, or maybe your tray is slightly warped and you'll appear to have more water at one end than another. So it's always good to check both ends. And then set your pitcher off to the side, not to the edge of the table, somewhere where it won't tip over, especially if it still has water in it. Okay, and then I have my India inks. I'm going to keep those on the other side of my tray. If you're working independently, that is the best, safest place to leave them. If you're working in a group setting, which we will be doing in class, you can have them on the other sides of the tray here, just so long as they're close to the tray and not off to the edge of the table. I would also recommend, this is helpful, use one hand to hold the jar itself, and then your other hand you can use to drop the ink down. That way you always know where the container of ink is. I can't stress enough how important it is to have the ink away from the edge of the table. It will spill whatever it lands on. Okay, and the inks do need to be shaken up. The teachers will shake these for you most likely, but if for any reason we tell you you can shake it, you need to make sure the lid is on tight. And shake it up a bit. The top of this lid has a little rubber piece that you can squeeze, because the inside of this, it's a dropper. And so when I squeeze this rubber piece, it sucks up ink through the glass tube on the inside. That way you're able to drip ink out from the tube. Okay? And I recommend before you get started, make sure everybody has their inks ready to go. Some of the inks are a little older and ink can get trapped where the cap seals to the jar once it's closed. So make sure you all have your containers open first before beginning. I'm just squeezing the droppers to make sure I have ink in there. And then take one of the pieces of your, what's called a chasing paper. Place it into the water. You'll see it starts to absorb. Sometimes this paper can sink to the bottom and you can take it out and place a new one in to continue, or you can print it and just start over. Okay. And when you drop the ink onto this paper, you don't want to drop it in the center. That won't do anything. You want to drop it towards the edge. See how much ink traveled across the surface of the water, but yet most of my ink touched the paper. You'll want to do that repeatedly. See how I had just a little bit, I don't know if you can see on the camera, little bit of ink that actually dropped off into the water. It immediately sank to the bottom. So I didn't get quite as much color on the surface with that one. And you'll just continue doing this until you're satisfied. I will tell you, you'll get to a point where the ink begins to sink to the bottom and you need to move a little quicker and begin to print, because you won't have, if the ink sinks to the bottom, you won't have as much ink on the surface to make your print. Can you see why this is now called the chasing paper? You're kind of chasing it. I must not be as good with the red. I got quite a bit off of the edge there. That was a little better. Oop, dropped a lot of that one off the edge. So just take your time, trying to make sure that you are getting your dropper on the paper itself. I've seen many students just so excited and they move too quickly and end up dropping so much ink to the tray. Oh, I can begin to see that my ink is sinking. So I'm going to take one of my toothpicks and I'm going to use it to help pick up this paper out of the water. If you put it underneath and slowly pick it up, it won't disturb your design too much. You can also just pinch and pull it out, but that will disturb your design quite a bit. And then you can also use your toothpick to slowly move through the water. You can see how the different colors will mix together. Okay. And if your water is moving around quite a bit, you will want to wait just a little bit to let things settle, because if it's moving around, what do you think that'll do when you put your paper to the water? You won't get quite as crisp of a design. So before I had mentioned to hold your paper on the corners or on this edge of the shorter side of the paper and slowly let that paper drop to the water. Another way would be to hold the corners that are farthest from each other. And you can take this, you'd want to start with the corner where you have a finger holding on, because if I started with this corner, I wouldn't have as much control. So I'm going to place it in the water, but I'm not letting it go once it touches. So I've touched the water and then I let my paper roll out. And then once I know that corner's in, I can drop this other corner. You can already see that the paper is absorbing the water, or excuse me, the ink. It's absorbing the ink and water. Okay, now I can see full saturation. I'm going to grab this top right corner. If you're left-handed, you might grab the left corner. And then I have my left hand here ready to support my print when I pull it out. And you will have to turn your wrist So I'm touching the back of the paper, turning my wrist, and then you hold it over the tray, allowing the remaining water that's on the paper to drip. Might take a little bit of time. There it goes. Here's my print. And you can place it on the table space around you, or if we have a drying rack set up, you can also use the drying rack. Now, after you've done one print, you can still continue to use this water. You might think that there's ink in there, so you can no longer use it, but that's not the case. That ink will sink to the bottom, just as you can see here, and you can keep adding colors. Now, the only thing you might want to think about is if you decide to change your colors, some of the colors that you used on your previous prints might still show up. So let's say I chose to use black instead of purple. Well, I'll definitely still have some remaining stripes of black on my second print because I used such a dark color to begin with. So just think about that when you make your color selections. Now for cleaning up, you will take care of your own inks and your paper, obviously, and your other tools like the toothpicks for cleaning up and your red bucket, but you will not move your tray. The teachers will come around and we will take the tray and have a bucket sitting on your seat, and we'll slowly pour the tray into the bucket. But you guys will not be doing that. Do not move your trays from your workspace. It's so easy to spill the water. So we appreciate you waiting for us. Have fun.